taking these in the order they're in here?
Yeah. Yeah, we've got, here's our bills tonight.
Mr. Chairman, we are live.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. I'll call this meeting to order. Kim, would you please call roll? Thank you.
Senator Anderson?
Here.
Senator Furphy?
Here.
Senator McEwen?
He's going down the stairs.
Excused?
Senator Pappas?
Here.
Chairman Landon?
Here. Thank you, Kim. Just a couple of housekeeping notes. Committee, I mentioned up on the floor, we will meet on Friday at noon. Chairman Anderson will be tied up, but we will take up a couple of bills, which should help us next Monday, I think. So just keep that in mind. As usual, I would ask of everyone here tonight, let's be professional. Let's abide by the decorum that is necessary to get good work done. On the Senate side, we did have an announcement from our Senate president today that it is declared out of order and a breach of decorum for anyone to video record with any device or in any format from the floor of the Senate or in this committee room without prior approval of the chair. I have heard nothing of the such, so we won't have any recording tonight. Let's take up the first bill for our consideration, which is House Bill.
Mr. Chairman, could I ask one question before?
Senator Pappas, go ahead.
Since we are having the meeting on Friday, do we have a location?
Kim, have you
Just so we can
located a room yet?
I believe, Mr. Chairman, it will be in this room.
In this room? Okay, thank you.
We'll be announcing the next 2 days too, senators, on that. House Bill 81, Operation of Motorcycles, Disabled Persons. Representative Burt, good evening. Well, what is the matter? Representative Marshall, or Representative Marshall Burt, please walk us through this bill and tell us what we're up to.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. This should be a very simple fix-it bill. It addresses the inequality we have within our state statutes. Current statute language doesn't prohibit a disabled rider from riding motorcycles in our state, but it does, however, prohibit the ability for disabled riders from riding specially modified motorcycles to ride within our state. So I want to just kind of go over briefly the bill and then kind of let you ask the questions. I mean, that way I know we're kind of where we stand on it. If we look at the first section, section 1 on page 2, subsections A, B, and K, they address the current language is it's designed to have a rider sit astride a seat. So like you would on a normal motorcycle, right? One leg over the seat. The issue we have when it comes to disabled riders that don't have that capability, where they may have a modified motorcycle such as a trike. They either have modifications that allow their wheelchairs to basically roll into a motorcycle, like the backside of a motorcycle, or they may have a modified seat to where they're not sitting on a normal seat, but it might seem like we're sitting in a chair where your legs are over that. So the law, our current statutes don't allow them to ride that way because we are directing the ride astride. When you look at K, it talks about language on prohibiting a wheelchair from being physically attached to a bike. When we look at language like that, what we're doing is we're preventing someone from using a seatbelt if required to hold themselves in, or a lot of the way that trikes are modified, if they're going to use a wheelchair, is to lock that wheelchair into the bike. That way it doesn't roll when they're moving. So again, the statute prevents us currently from having anybody use a seatbelt or actually locking or securing their bike or their wheelchair into a bike. We can also see language in B where we're talking about passengers. So it doesn't just address disabled riders that actually want to operate the vehicle. It also addresses passengers that may be disabled from locking themselves into, say, like a modified sidecar, where you'd have the operator of the motorcycle might be sitting astride the bike, but the passenger might be sitting in a sidecar, which would be modified for, for their needs. We can pause there if we have any questions.
Representative, that helps. Any questions to this point, committee? Okay. Anything else on the bill?
So we can go down to section 2. I know there are some concerns on the repealer side of this. This made it through our introductory, our House Transportation Committee, as well as Committee of the Whole, and all three readings, without any concerns on where the repealer is and why it's still in the bill. So we have manufacturers that are limited from directly selling modified bikes, or if you look at our current statute within a definition of a motorcycle, motorcycles are also include motorized bikes and scooters. And we have manufacturers out there that aren't allowed to actually sell or directly ship some of these products to the state because of our current handlebar height. Now with that, we've talked to representatives of the motorcycle industry that build these bikes. And they talk about having a restriction at a particular height could prevent them, depending on the needs of the rider, from actually having their handlebars set to a certain height. Now, when we continue into it, how does that affect for the rest of us that aren't disabled, right? So we looked at, as a whole, what is the current need of having a handlebar height? Now, there's no actual national recommendation or standard from the National Transportation Safety Board that has any standard whatsoever on the height of handlebars, and that relates to the safety aspect of it. So when you look at how handlebars are currently made and manufactured, for those that don't know, I'm an avid rider myself. So when I build my bike to the way that I'm going to ride, I get a seat that fits comfortably and highway pegs, the whole shebang, including handlebars. In the 1970s, when the law first came around, the technology of motorcycles was extremely different than what we have now. A lot of that has to deal with the clutch system on how you disengage the motor so you can actually slow the bike down, which was kind of a big concern. The longer the bike would ride, the pressure would build up in the hydraulic system to where you would actually need more force to disengage that clutch. So it became a safety issue back in the day. Today's society, in our just the nature of what we do, technology has updated itself. And we've gone from a mechanical clutch to a hydraulic clutch. So it doesn't matter if I'm riding a mile or 800 miles. The clutching mechanism does not build that pressure up. So after 800 miles, I might still be tired, but I can still disengage that clutch with 2 fingers. I don't need that extra strength. So the other thing we look at on handlebar height, the optics of the height of a handlebar might look like it's unsafe. And it might look like we might lose the leverage to make sure that we can keep control of the handlebar. What we don't take into effect is that even though the handlebars might be higher, the width of the handlebars are actually designed to be able to add that mechanical advantage to where you might lose on some. So the two actually balance themselves out, so your safety standards are still there. I get if you don't get into it and stuff like that, it just looks like the handlebars are higher than where you sit. But there's a lot of physics involved into it to make sure that the standards are safe. When you look at manufacturers and how they produce, the aftermarket line for our bikes, they're not going to sell something that is intentionally unsafe for the rider on the road. Motorcycles have 2 wheels. For the most part, I have 2 inches of rubber when I ride, right? So when I build a bike for myself, just as anybody else would when they build a bike for themselves, we always look at how do we ride. It could be position, how long am I on a bike, how long are my arms to my torso. There's a lot of factors that go into how I build that. Now we set a standard on just at the shoulder height. That could actually pinch nerves and be an unsafe factor by determining that we want to put a limit that we think is safe. But it could actually make us unsafe if we try to put a limit in there. And that's where the repealer actually comes from, is there's no actual safety standard of that. So removing it, and we've had testimony in the House transportation side from YDOT or Highway Patrol, and we have a representative here that might attest to this as well. There's, like I said, removing that, it just doesn't actually make it an unsafe vehicle to operate. And as our laws have continued to change, technology change, we're actually seeing a lot of states that are actually repealing their height because they understand it's not a safety issue. It actually becomes a punitive issue.
Okay,
Stand
questions,
for
committee?
questions.
Senator Furphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I got two questions, actually. Any discussion when a motorcycle's been modified to meet the requirements of a disabled person? What about carrying a passenger? Is that any risk? And my second question is along the same lines. What if a person tries to modify the bike themselves? Does someone inspect it to make sure it meets the safety requirements? Thank you.
Representative.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Furby. So to answer the first question on that, again, I'm not trying to start a new industry, right? We're just trying to bring the laws up there. So current industry has, where manufacturers are currently modifying trikes for the most part, or motorcycles with sidecars, to actually allow disabled riders from allowing them to operate the motorcycle and have a passenger. So the standards are still there on what is required to be able to have a passenger in a sidecar. So if we had a modified seat for the disabled rider to operate it, then the sidecar would still have to meet industry national standards for safety to make sure that it's still not an unsafe motorcycle. When it comes to someone that modifies their vehicle, more than likely, like if I change my handlebars on my motorcycle, I don't get it inspected. But the aftermarket side of it, I mean, I guess if I was out to manufacture my own motorcycles, that'd be different. But anything that I buy aftermarket is designed to meet the standards of the National Transportation. They have a standard, and I can't remember off the top of my head. I apologize for the actual motor carrier standard for what actually identifies for motorcycles. So there's a standard on how a display is supposed to lay out and how the controls are supposed to lay out. And they have exemptions for like law enforcement because of the addition of radars and particular sirens and those kind of operations. But normal motorcycles that are sold in the market are required to have a standard. Within that standard, handlebars aren't in there. So someone that's going to modify that, we would normally go something that's aftermarket. Anything aftermarket has to meet an industry standards such as like helmets. If I'm going to buy a helmet, it all has to meet, anybody that sells a helmet has to meet a DOT requirement.
Follow up, Senator? Other questions? So I've got one, and Representative, I was going to ask you about the repealer. I appreciate you walking us through that. I think I heard you say that some of the modifications that you may have to do to accommodate a disabled person's bike would require some length on some handlebars. So it does come into play in certain circumstances when you're modifying for a disabled rider?
Mr. Chairman, it could. And I can't speak to specifics because each rider that goes in and has a modification done could be very specific. Such as some assisted devices, if you have, say, a missing leg from your knee down and you can't actually shift within the gears, they actually have the ability to add those modifications to the actual handlebar. So you can still ride, but you wouldn't be able to, if you may not be able to shift, or on one side you have a rear brake on your foot pedal. So if you don't have that, then they have the modifications on the handlebars. So without knowing specifically of who we're building a bike for, I really wouldn't be able to speak to volumes. But talking to manufacturers that do actually that actually manufacture and build these and modify these bikes, we have limitations on what we can and can't do because it depends on the rider themselves and however the rider sits, how they position. And again, it's no two people ride exactly the same. So putting those limits in there could actually restrict the way that a manufacturer could modify a bike to the disabled rider's need.
Thank you for that.
Yes, sir.
Appreciate it. Representative, if you could stick around, we'd appreciate it. I want to go to the Department of Transportation. And
One more question.
Oh, I'm
One
sorry.
more
Back to Senator
One more
Anderson.
question.
I wouldn't have jumped in front of you yet.
Mr. Chairman, the manufacturers do a certain modification for those bikes, but I as a rider can do another modification when I get it to my place. So I can put on more ape hangers or whatever I want to do and still ride my bike. Isn't that true?
Representative?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Anderson, that is correct. And like I said, I don't go through a manufacturer to, I mean, if I'm on my second bike and I've had changes of handlebars or even seats. And that is correct. I go through and I don't have a machine shop at home. So I don't have the ability to make my own. So I go through my local dealer and I buy the handlebars that I look at and I like. And again, within those, they have to meet industry standard to make sure that they are safe. And when I do that, I can have, any number of variances. I can have 8 inches to 15 or 20 inches, but then I also have a width. And the width could be, the closer to my chest, it would make the ride very uncomfortable and unsafe because I lose that balance. So then I look at, the measurements. Dealer, we sit and we measure on a like model motorcycle. I sit on that. And then we can gauge the width on how wide my arms as well. And that's where you gain control. Now, there are times that you can buy something that looks good, right? And you think you might like that. Could it be a set of rims or a seat? And if it doesn't fit, doesn't work, a lot of times the riders just has to eat the cost and then go back and replace something to make sure that it fits for that rider. But in the inherent nature, we don't build a bike to where it's uncomfortable for us. We want to make sure we have all that so we have that comfortable ride.
Mr. Chairman,
Okay,
follow up.
Go ahead, Senator Anderson.
Follow up. People see motorcycles and they see handlebars close together or far apart or whatever they are, and they think, well, he couldn't turn that bike. But the truth is, you don't turn the bike with the handlebars, you lean. So those handlebars can be, like you say, wherever you're comfortable with them, they can be right there. And you can still lean that bike. Never turn a bike with the handlebars. So it should not be a safety issue. It's a personal issue.
So Representative, sounds like one of the senators is agreeing with you here. So any other questions, senators? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr.
Representative
Chairman. And just for hopes, I hope that all senators would agree with me. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. We'll work on that. We'll see how that goes, Representative. Long ways to go on this one. Well, Senator Hutchings, please come forward. We want to hear from you first. I noticed that your name is on this one. How about that?
Senator is a writer.
Well, bless your
And,
little old heart. Senator Hutchings, tell us what you know and what you feel about this bill.
I'm not going to tell you what I know because I came in here to find out. And, but I was intrigued by the bill when I was sent a copy to co-sponsor. And like I say, being handicapped, I'm really looking forward to the passage of this bill. I've seen some of the pictures that the bringer of the bill sent out, and some of these bikes are just awesome. I remember when I was a freshman at UW, I befriended a lady in a wheelchair, and she said, "Hey, come on, let's go for a ride." And it was in a car or her van. And I was scared to death. I'm thinking, what in the world is she going to be able to do? And she was able to maneuver the van with her hands. So that fascinated me as well. And I developed a sense of real safety with her, that she knew what she was doing. So with all that said, I'm here to learn what the Good Bringer is presenting to you. And I hope you guys like what he does and get this bill out of committee onto the Senate floor.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Appreciate you being here. Any questions for Senator Hutchings? Senator
sir.
Anderson.
Senator Hutchings, do you need modifications on your motorcycle?
No.
Yeah,
Excuse
okay.
me, Mr. Chairman. What I did is I chose a bike, a scooter style, it's about 405 pounds, that enables me to sit upright and keep my legs in a certain position, and everything is done with my hands. I don't have to do a lot with my feet, and it keeps me comfortable and riding upright.
Oh, good, good.
I've even been known to actually fall asleep a couple times on my bike in DC, believe it or not. and
So
made it
Senator
out
Hartsey,
alive.
you know that we're online and that.
I'm telling you, I'm
That got
confessing.
boomed out across the state there.
I'm confessing.
Yeah, thank you very much, Senator.
Thank you, Mr.
Really
Chairman.
appreciate you coming tonight. I don't see any other legislators in the room who are going to testify on this one. I do see one of the representatives, but I think she's going to save it for next. Department of Transportation would love to hear from you guys. Director Reiner? Yeah, very good. Josh, good to see you, but please state your name for everyone else.
Mr. Chairman, Committee, Josh Walther, I'm the Lieutenant Colonel for the Wyoming Highway Patrol. Yeah, Representative Burt did a fantastic job. I don't have a whole lot more to add, especially on the bill itself and the changes in the bill itself. We think it's a good move and something that should be considered. Obviously, we're looking at this from a safety perspective and any loopholes that folks might misinterpret with the bill, which we don't see. I think this is solid. The only comments I'd make are regarding the repeal, the 31.5 115N repeal for the extended handlebars. Representative Burt's right. There's roughly 30 states that regulate handlebar height. There doesn't seem to be consistency between the states. Of course, we do the shoulder height. How we came up with that, I'm not sure. Folks do anywhere from shoulder eye height up to a 30-inch handlebar from the seat. That's how much they vary. So when thinking about this and thinking about folks raising a handlebar 4 inches or lowering a handlebar 4 inches or making it 6 inches, and I don't think that's an issue. We don't have any stats to show that extended handlebars cause any issues or cause any crashes or more injuries than crashes. We work roughly 5,000 to 6,000 crashes a year. Maybe 100 of those are motorcycle crashes. So we don't have a lot of facts and data on that, and we don't have anything nationwide to support the fact that extended handlebars cause crashes. My only concern, and I'd be remiss if I didn't say, is, I picture the extremes, and we've all seen them probably where folks' arms are literally straight up in the air. And just from a logical standpoint, I don't know how that cannot decrease safety. From everything I've read and researched, the main concern is arm fatigue. And obviously your controls, regardless of the technology of the bike, your controls are on the handlebars. And so that's the only concern I would have with folks that have their arms literally stretched straight up in the air, is arm fatigue. But again, there's no data to support that. There's nothing. It appears states are moving away from handlebar height requirements. South Dakota, I think, just did a few years ago. So that seems to be the trend. And I think we have roughly 30 states left who still have handlebar requirements, but I don't know what the number is. There's nothing consistent to report, and I don't have any data that specifically says when you get to this height, there's increased risk of crashes or more arm fatigue or whatever it may be. So just wanted to make those statements, but in general, we support this, and I don't see any major issues or loopholes.
Lieutenant Colonel, you answered one of my questions partially, and that is that South Dakota has eliminated that height requirement. Are there any other states around us that have? I'm just wondering how a bike's going to get here. If someone takes off across country, and can they even get to Wyoming with those high handles?
Yeah, I don't know every state, but with 30 states, I assume that there's several around us or in close proximity who do have requirements. The thing is, I don't know that they're really enforced.
Yeah.
We certainly have a lot bigger fish to fry than handlebar requirements. If we see a major safety hazard or something going on where folks' arms are stretched out and there's something else going on, it may be cause for a stop. But we're not running details and specifically targeting handlebar extensions. And I think that's probably par for the course around the country. I can't speak for other states, but I'm not hearing of an issue with handlebar extensions around the country when we talk with our partners.
Okay, thank you. Questions for the Lieutenant Colonel? Okay, thank you.
Thanks, sir.
Appreciate it, Josh. Thanks for being here. I don't see any other agency folks that might want to testify. Let's go to public comment on House Bill 81 is the number. Please come forward. Thank you. State your name for us tonight and
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
talk to us about House Bill 81.
Yes, my name is Ben Hornock. I live here in Laramie County, but I taught motorcycle safety class for YDOT for several years. And one of the, I guess it's a hobby of mine, you know, with the motorcycles. I love riding with the limited time we have riding out here. But I would say that this bill actually I would support this bill because it brings Wyoming into the modern motorcycle era. Manufacturers are doing all they can to, bring in other groups like people with disabilities. So they're not going to manufacture a bike that is not safe for the road, whatever that means. I don't know, but this bill will allow them to do that here in Wyoming, and also with the ape hanger bars. I'm fairly tall, but it's difficult sometimes. Manufacturers can build bikes off the factory floor where somebody riding this bike is against the law in Wyoming, just off the manufacturer floor, because the handlebars, especially on custom bikes, are manufactured high. I think this just kind of, brings Wyoming into the current modern era. We don't have a helmet law in Wyoming, and I would prefer to keep it that way, even though it's, in my opinion, stupid to ride without a helmet. But you allow us to make that choice. And that's what's appreciated about riding motorcycles. And so I would also say that this is the same thing when it comes to how people want to customize or modify their motorcycles. Thank you.
So Ben, I apologize. I did not get your last name.
Hornock.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Any questions for Mr. Hornock? Senator Furphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me ask you about safety issues. I've lost a couple of my friends to motorcycle accidents. And it seems to be a visibility issue, not only for people not seeing the motorcycle, but the motorcycle riders not seeing traffic coming from a different direction. You have any thoughts on how we can improve all that and keep safety at the top of the issue for motorcycle drivers so we can keep them as safe as possible? Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Hornock.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Furphy, it's a valid question. And I don't know that there is a pat answer, a good answer, because when I was teaching the motorcycle safety class, one of the interesting things that would happen is we would have a guy show up with his wife because he wanted to finally get his wife. His wife has a brand new bike sitting in the garage, and he's been riding for years and years and years, and he wants to get his wife off the back of his bike. And after the end of the weekend, I would trust her on a motorcycle more than I would that guy. It's just, there are habits that are formed. There are, do-rags do not take the place of helmets. There are other safety things that people make choices when they straddle a motorcycle. And I make certain choices because of the way that I want to ride and the way that I want to be seen. My suit is ridiculously bright. My lights are ridiculously bright. So I make certain choices when I ride my motorcycle. Other people make their own choices, and I wouldn't do it, but I'm all for letting them make those kind of choices. Yeah.
Senator Furphy, any follow-up? So, Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, don't you think most of the really extreme handlebars that are way up in the air are not from the original manufacturer, but from some customizer, or maybe even the guy built it himself?
Mr. Hornock?
Mr. Chairman, through you, Senator Anderson, you're probably correct. I mean, they make those. That's one of the easy ways to customize your bike. You have to extend the brake lines, you have to extend the clutch line, all that stuff. But you can probably go down to the dealership or online, and that's probably one of the big things that you find online is those bars, customized bars all the time. So yes, you know, I have had people tell me that it's a very comfortable way to ride in some ways. I don't know, because I don't necessarily do that, but I also spend hours and hours on my bike, and usually those guys are cruising around town and done quickly. So I don't know.
Bar to bar.
You know, Peter Fonda went all the way from California to Louisiana that way. He was, you know.
Yeah, he did.
So, Mr. Hornock, I do have a question. As I go up and down the highways, I don't ride a bike, but I've noticed that a lot of bike riders do tend to hug the middle a little bit. Is that something you counsel them to do for visibility? I'm just curious. What's your thoughts on that?
Chairman Landon, again, it's so when I started riding, I would hug that left part of the lane, and you're on a two-way street going 65 miles an hour, and you have the semis passing you that closely. And when I started teaching the motorcycle safety classes, or when I took the class originally, that was one of the takeaways, was use the lane. It is there. It's that wide for a reason, and you can use it to your advantage. And no, I wouldn't recommend you stay in one part of the lane, but there are ways that you can, there are areas that you can pick in a lane that would present yourself a lot better, that would make you much more visible to either oncoming traffic or the car in front of you, or, you know, there was a story actually of one of the motorcycle safety instructors who got pulled over by highway patrol because he was swerving all over the lane. And when they questioned him, that's what we teach: use the lane. Sure. Because when there's oncoming traffic, the best thing to do is give them space, especially in the Wyoming wind. You know, when the wind's going certain directions, it will blow you around. So, but most people don't understand that. That's why I do recommend. I mean, I tell friends of mine, if you want to, you know, ride a motorcycle, don't do it without taking the safety class, and I will pay for that safety class for you. I don't care what it costs. You know, that is critical.
Well, thank you for that. Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, a lot of states, there's a ruts in the highway, in the surface, because of heavy trucks or whatever it is. So you want to ride the ridges, and there's 3 ridges. One's on the center, one's in the middle, and one's on the edge. Now, not in Wyoming, there aren't any roads like that, but there are in some states bad ridges. And why you want to get trained like that is because when it's wet, it's also a hazard for you in those ruts. So there are people riding all over the road.
See, that's why I like hanging out with all you guys, because I'm learning all sorts of things. But anything else for Mr. Hornock? Really appreciate you being here tonight. Thank you. That's great testimony. And I see Senator Salazar is in the room. I'm going to ask him to come forward. Any thoughts he might have on this fine House bill? Senator Salazar, thanks for coming by.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, it's a pleasure to be before your committee. So I just wanted to express my support for this bill. I know that Representative Burt has put so much time and effort, and it just, my name is on this bill proudly because I think it will just give more freedom to so many individuals who have physical restrictions, and I think it's good for the state. It's good for our constituents. I think it passed it out of the House 60 to 0. But you all are the experts. I just wanted to give my 2 cents worth, Mr. Chairman. So.
You know, that 60 to nothing on the other side, Senator, makes me a little nervous, but no, that's great. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator, appreciate it. Any other further public comment on House Bill 81? Bill Winnie.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, Bill Winnie, Sublette County. I get up to speak on motorcycle stuff at great risk because I do not ride. But with regard to moving around in the lane, the swerving that you were just talking about, I have some knowledge that is germane. I'm an FAA certificated flight instructor. The most dangerous condition when two planes are approaching each other at the same altitude is when they don't change relative position. And that's what the swerving or whatever in the lane is doing, is it moves your relative position relative to some other vehicle. That makes you more visible, more apparent. And so, subject to your questions, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Winnie. Any questions? Thanks, Bill. Appreciate it. Any further comment on House Bill 81? Anybody, nobody online tonight? Any further public comment? Okay, public comment is closed. What's your pleasure on this bill?
Move the bill.
Okay, we will come back to Representative for a final thought or two. Then we're going to work this bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I was listening to everything, there are a couple questions coming up, and I just want to kind of work on those. So one of the questions were other states surround us. So we have North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, Idaho, and Colorado that do not have height and restrictions. So we are one of very few within our region that actually have limits. So if anybody's traveling through the I-80 corridor, passing through, they could be violation. The enforcement side of it, since 2011, 2019, 72 violations have been written against the handlebar height. Of that, 47 of those were written during August, the month of August, which happens to be during Sturgis. And during our House committee testimony, when we listened to Colonel Holler from Highway Patrol, he had actually basically let us know that during that time frame of August, most of those violations were written for out-of-state riders, not knowing our law, and up in the northeast section of the state as they're passing through to get up into. Another question was on fatigue, on how high your arms can be. I have run 3 endurance course rides. I've run 1,000 miles in 24 hours, 1,500 miles in 36 hours, and 2,000 miles in 48 hours. Regardless of the height of my handlebars, I can guarantee you my arms were tired. Height didn't have anything to play with. It was just the time I spent on there. How can we keep riders safe from other riders? We have enough laws in the books. We don't allow texting and driving. We don't allow drinking and driving. We don't allow people watching movies when they drive. It happens. I've been ran off the road into the ditch. I've hit small animals, and these are concerns and things that we look at and the risk we take. So when I ride for not only myself and my wife when I'm on the bike, but also everybody else around me, because they may not see me, but I see them. So inherently, it's our own responsibility to make sure we're safe. What else we have? So on the swerving back and forth in the lane, there's a lot of different variances on why we do that. During the daytime, a lot of times I will ride on the far right-hand side of my lane, and that's to keep me away from the oncoming traffic. At night, I'll make my move to the middle of the lane, because that way I don't, if I have an animal on the side of it, usually on the shoulder, it gives me more room and flexibility to swerve in the other lane and get away from that. It also depends on the type of road. If you got a bad road conditions, a lot of sand and stuff like that, it's usually in the shoulder. That affects the way we handle. We also know with the wind and stuff like that, as I'm passing semis, I've actually been sucked into as a vacuum when I get into next to a semi, right? So we try to keep those lanes away from us. Oncoming traffic, I've had it to where it's almost blown me off as oncoming semis will create that vacuum behind them and then it hits me with that gust of air. So the swerving back and forth is, as a rider, always picks the safest route. And it could be debris in the road, it could be, the ruts and stuff like that. So a couple of the questions I heard, I just want to kind of follow up on that where we're at. If we're looking at a fiscal impact, since 2011, the state has only made $3,600 in the 10 years. We're not looking at a revenue source for the bill. We're really looking at a punitive bill when we look at riders coming from outside the state. We look at number 2 in our tourism. I myself have ridden through our state parks on a motorcycle. Luckily, no buffaloes on the road, but I've done it. So if it was truly safety, then you would see more and more states actually pushing this out there. I don't want us to get hung up on the height of a handlebar when the intent is to allow the freedom and the equality of how we ride. And putting that restriction on a set limit restricts the way that a rider, regardless if they're disabled or not, prevents the way that they can build that, whether it's comfortable for them. And a comfortable rider is a safe rider, regardless of the height of the handlebars. So for that, I will stand for any committee or for any questions. And I'll just kind of hang out here and let you guys work the bill.
Okay,
so.
thank you, Representative. We're going to move along.
Thank you, sir.
Back to the committee. I believe that it was moved and seconded. I apologize, I did not catch who moved it or who seconded it.
3 people moved.
Moved, and then Senator Anderson seconded. So Senator Furphy, and I think we even had one over here. Discussion on the bill, committee. Okay, any amendments on the bill? Okay, ready for roll call?
Yep.
Roll call on House Bill 81, Kim.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Andis.
Aye.
Senator Furphy.
Aye.
Senator McEwen.
Aye.
Senator Pappas.
Aye.
Chairman Landon.
Aye. It's a good bill. Thank you, Representative. Appreciate you being here. Thank you. I think that we will probably, I notice our senators are gone, but we'll just see if one of those fine senators won't mind taking it up on the floor. We'll back them up, Representative. Okay, good enough. We'll be right behind him if a fight breaks out. Okay. We're going to go to House Bill 53 and gross military department discrimination or harassment grievances. Looking forward to hearing from the department tonight on this one, just as a refresher and to help us know what we did on the other side. Good evening, General. Good to see you.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Major General Greg Porter. I serve as the Adjutant General for the state of Wyoming. Sir, if you recall, this is an interim topic that came late in the interim, but was a result of some actions that the committee wanted to take to help the military department get after some of the resource deficits in dealing with sexual harassment, sexual assault, equal opportunity. This bill really focuses on 2 things. First one is establishes an Article 138 process, which when we redid the code, the Wyoming State Code last session, we left that. It's not a punitive article, so we didn't adopt that as a punitive article. What 138 does is it allows, though, if somebody believes that they have not been heard or been received the shall we say, the attention that they believe to their problem, they have the opportunity to take that up the chain of command. Think this is a good process. I think it's important to point out this really only applies to our military members, those in uniform in that status to be able to do that. Second part of the bill.
General, can you
Yes, sir.
repeat that?
Yes, sir.
It only.
Yep. So the Article 138 process really only applies to those folks in the military status. So for our Title V folks, our civilian personnel, they wouldn't use Article 138. And if our full-time folks, if they happen to be in a technician status, a federal status, even though they wear the uniform, it wouldn't apply to them either.
Thank you for answering that, General. You know, the reason I ask, I want to walk carefully through this committee because that is a difficult thing for civilians to get arms around. And, you know, even those of us on the committee who work with you all during the interim.
Yes, sir.
You know, it's kind of hard to, we're lucky to have Senator McEwen here. He knows a little bit more than us, but it's a little tough. We've got different different kinds of employees in our military department. So thank you for that.
Yes, sir.
Please
Status,
continue.
sir, Mr. Chairman, status is often confusing, and you'll see the differentiation on this one is we take Article 138. It says Wyoming National Guard. Most of the other references you'll see Wyoming Military Department, which we take to encompass all of our civilian personnel as well. So that's really the difference in how this bill is shaped. Second part of the bill gets after our ability to work with workforce services and gain their assistance in counseling, equal opportunity, EEO sort of actions. They can help us investigate it. They can help us do counseling with them. We can help with mediation. And this was important for us because of particularly during COVID, the very difficult time we had reaching out to find investigators to come do EEOC investigations for us. Now, we don't do very many of these, maybe one to two a year. But when we do, it is going to be very handy to be able to reach out to our sister agency and have them assign an investigator and build that rapport and that working relationship that we have between the two of them. Part of that process is also to authorize a position and the appropriate funding for them to be able to do that. So that's really the two big focuses of the bill: establish Article 138, and then secondly, establish this relationship with workforce services. And if there are no questions, I could certainly turn it over to Major Hinkle to actually walk through the bill if you feel that's necessary and get any additional information on it.
General, thank you. We do want to go to the major here in a minute. Just to emphasize that final point that you made, working with workforce services, it's our anticipation that that's going to expedite. Do you feel the same way, General? That should allow us to get to an investigation quicker, should it not?
Mr. Chairman, absolutely. That is the entire intent behind it is for that to happen. And I feel very comfortable that that's the effect we're going to achieve.
Any questions of the general so far? Okay, thank you so much. And Major, it's good to see you tonight. Thanks for being here.
Mr.
Please
Chairman,
offer us any thoughts and considerations and walk us through the bill, okay?
thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's my pleasure to be here. My name's Major Karen Hinkle. I'm the Staff Judge Advocate for the 153rd Airlift Wing, which is part of the Wyoming Air National Guard under the Wyoming Military Department. My thoughts just initially as we prepare to walk through this is that this would be a great benefit to the department, especially in terms of looking at how we investigate EEOC type complaints, because it has been a challenge for us in the past. It's just difficult to get contractors to provide those services for us. And sometimes it's difficult to get loaner personnel from other federal agencies who can conduct those in a timeline that the federal jurisdictions mandate that we complete them in. So this would be a benefit for us in doing that. Just to walk you through the bill, would you like me to take you line by line or just provide summaries, Mr. Chairman?
Major, I think maybe just paragraph by paragraph, section by section is good enough. If you can just kind of remind us what we're doing as we go.
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman. And if it's all right, we'll just start with section 1, which is at the beginning, or sorry, the very end of page 1. And starts on page 2. So this is a modification to Title 19, which is under the state military department code. This first paragraph really establishes the Article 138 process. And as Major General Porter mentioned, this is going to apply only to members of the National Guard. And essentially, it just states that if a member has been wronged by a commanding officer, they have the right to request redress from that commanding officer. It doesn't specify the whither and how of doing that, but they have the right to request redress. And if that commanding officer declines to provide it, then this gives them the authority, the member who is seeking that redress, to raise a complaint to any superior commissioned officer. Depending on that adjudication, that gets forwarded up to the Adjutant General. It gets resolved, and depending on the outcome, all of that's going to go to the appropriate general, depending on the state that member is from, is how I read that. Pending any questions, I'll move to the next paragraph.
Senator McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As we seek this other higher ranking commissioned officer, are we not trying to follow the chain of command in process with it? Or is it can I just go shop for a colonel that I like? I mean, I don't know how to put that other ways, but having commanded at different levels, I think if one of my soldiers went outside of the command before I knew what was going on, they'd have more problems to worry about than their equal opportunity stuff. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Major?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And Senator McCune, the way I read it is that it would open it up to any superior commissioned officer. So normally in the provisions and actually the AFI regulation that we would have normally used, it tends to go straight up the chain of command. So it would be the superior commissioned officer of the commander who did not provide redress. And the member would more likely than not probably continue to follow that chain of command, but this language does not specifically restrict them from doing that. They could seek a different 06 as opposed to the one that would be above their, for example, squadron commander, if that's who the complaint was filed against. But the nice thing about this is that really it's going to get to the attention of someone who by statute has an obligation to address that complaint. And so I don't think it would harm the member just by having an OSIC that's not directly within their chain. It will still get addressed. They'll probably refer it over to the OSICs in the different organizational structure.
Okay, thank you, Major. You want to follow up? Go ahead, Senator.
I'm going to ask, so are we doing this because of the different titles of service that are happening and maybe that makes it easier to get it going faster? Or are we literally not concerned about keeping it in the chain of command? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman.
So,
if I may.
General, please jump in, absolutely.
Senator McEwen, I think we certainly left it open. And I thought where the check and balance comes in is when we talk about redress. If you start getting out of the chain of command, the ability for those personnel to actually to actually make redress is pretty limited. So it's not like they can jump across and do something else. At some point, though, it gets to me or somebody that's over both of them where redress can occur. So I think what we were really trying to make sure here is that complaints got heard. If they didn't feel comfortable with the chain of command, then they could go outside of the chain of command. But when redress happens, that's probably going to have to go through the chain of command. That's how it's going to get fixed.
Okay, Senator, thank you, General. Major, please continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Moving to section 2, it's really talking about establishing a new paragraph. And once we get to this section, we are moving over to the creation of the relationship with the workforce services. So at the bottom of page 2 in 19.7.103, we're talking about responsibilities and duties of the adjutant general. And if you move to page 3, paragraph B and its subparagraph, which is 25 XXV, this outlines the requirements for the adjutant general to establish a relationship with the Department of Workforce Services that will allow us to conduct mediation, counseling, and investigations of EEOC complaints. This requires the military department and the Department of Workforce Services to promulgate rules, although I believe the Workforce Services requirement comes in at a little bit later place in the bill. The deadline to do that is pretty fast, but it's going to be consistent with federal regulations and Equal Employment Opportunity Commission regulations.
So just real quickly, Major, what is the deadline? I know it's not in this paragraph, but is it just simply the July 1st date of the effective date of the bill? Or does that give you a little bit more leeway knowing that isn't October the fiscal year federal? And is there something we need to be aware of that we could fix there?
Mr. Chairman, give me just a moment. I thought I had it highlighted. When I read through this earlier, it was my understanding that the rules needed to be promulgated by July 1st. That's the effective date of the bill. And that is, I think, a quick turn. I think it's doable because really the rules are probably going to be very consistent with regulations that already exist on the federal side and probably also already exist. And I don't want to speak for the Department of Workforce Services. I assume they have rules that discuss how they conduct investigations.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate that. Please continue.
Any additional questions on this section of the bill, Mr. Chairman?
Committee? Okay, thanks. Please continue.
Mr. Chairman, moving forward, At the end of page 3, we're going to begin the definition section, which is 27-9-102. And really what this does on the beginning of page 4, this includes in the definition of employer divisions of the Wyoming Military Department that are authorized by federal authority. And this is important just because our state employees already have access to workforce services as a support agency. This will extend this to the majority of our employees who are full-time but are federal employees, so our technicians and our Title V folks. Moving down to section 27-9-104, powers and duties of the Department of Employment. All this does is add into the existing statute the language about counseling, mediation, or investigations, and that's just to cover a broader range of services that our equal employment opportunity managers are not able to conduct because of conflicts of interest. So our one full-time equal employment opportunity manager is able to manage cases and to take initial complaints, but in terms of providing additional services such as counseling or mediation, he's really restricted from doing that by regulations that govern what his position can do. And on the federal government's perspective, that's really to avoid conflicts of interest, because the person who provides those counseling and mediation services needs to be able to do that without having to manage the cases. And there's always just concern that somebody gets involved and is not able to maintain a clear head. Any questions on this section, Mr. Chairman?
Bottom of page 4. Okay, please continue, Major.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll go ahead and move to page 5. This authorizes really the, I just want to make sure I'm going to explain this correctly here. This authorizes, I believe it's the Department of Workforce Services, to enter into agreements with the military department and to conduct the activities such as counseling, mediation. So this is giving them permission to work directly with the department to kind of set up what that program is going to look like. It also describes what claims mean, and it defines it, and this is in line 6. A claim under this chapter are those that are enforced by Equal Employment Opportunity Commission federal laws. And so that kind of limits the types of claims that could be brought forth under this bill. And again, this is requiring the Department of Workforce Services to promulgate the effective rules, and those rules have to be consistent with regulations in federal law. And moving to line 16, there's the deadline that I was referring to earlier in section 3. These rules need to be promulgated by both of those agencies not later than July 1st. Any questions before we move to the next section, Mr. Chairman?
Anything, committee? We're in the middle of page 5.
I'm just wondering, can those rules be promulgated by then? Seems
Major?
tight.
And General.
Yes, sir, because that's what we were told to do, but I think we can do that. I mean, I don't know, Workforce Services would tell us any different, but yes, sir.
Chairman Landon, Jason Wolf with the Department of Workforce Services. I don't particularly see the rules as an issue. We already have fair employment rules that exist for our other state level discrimination claims. I think it's merely just a situation where we might just need to kind of alter those to meet the federal requirements, and we can enact those on an emergency basis, I think, pretty quick.
So Director Wolf, first of all, thank you for being here. Thanks for all the work that you put in with our military department and others to try to make this work. Really means a lot. Appreciate it. We were certainly going to have you come forward. You're welcome to stay put, because really this is a collective effort that we're all putting in here. But thank you for that. We'll come back to you. You feel like this is doable, that July 1st deadline?
Mr. Chairman, yeah, I think I've discussed it with my team. I think we can make some quick alterations. I think do an emergency rule on our fair employment rules that exist. We can add some additions to those, or maybe do a whole new chapter. But I think it'll be fairly easy with us once we get the information we need from the military department.
Okay, thank you for that. Major, please continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And actually, if it's all right with you, what I would like to do, and Mr. Wolf, I don't want to put you on the spot, but the next section really talks about the appropriations piece of it for the employee that would go under Department of Workforce Services. And so I believe it would be more prudent to pass that to Mr. Wolf.
So Director, go ahead.
Yeah.
Touch on that for us
Just
if you would.
Mr. Chairman, just to correct you, it's administrator. I'm not the director.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, yeah, so on page 5 is, at the bottom of page 5, section 4 is where we start the appropriation. And I think just if it wasn't clear, section 3, to my reading of the bill, makes this, effective July 1st for the rules. And then the appropriation section, you'll see down in section 5, that I believe becomes effective immediately. So on page 5, bottom of page 5, going to page 6, this is a general fund appropriation. So labor standards is the unit within our agency who normally does these equal employment opportunity investigations. As the major alluded to, we don't currently have the jurisdiction to do a federal claim like that. That's why we're going through this bill and making it so that our state employees can handle those discrimination claims that arise within the Wyoming Military Department.
Senator Pappas.
Yeah, I know. I noticed the House increased the appropriation by a little over $25,000. Was that an incorrect number to begin with, or how did that happen?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Pappas, what happened when we were originally doing the fiscal impact statement is we actually calculated the amount from July 1st going forward for the biennium. So when we found out that it was actually this portion of the appropriation was effective immediately, we backed that up to March so that we could effectively get a person onboarded so that we could be ready to roll by July 1st.
Okay, good question. Mr. Wolf, please continue. Thank you.
Yep. Mr. Chairman, so again, on page 6, the general fund appropriation for Department of Workforce Services for one full-time employee is on this section that it is mentioned there at line 21. It goes on to say that the intent of the legislature is that this is a position authorized for funding to basically continue with the Department of Workforce Services standard budget after the 23-24 biennium. And then section 5, again, it makes the appropriation effective immediately upon all stuff to be required to become law.
Okay. Committee, any other questions? Senator Anderson, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, that 226, is that for a 2-year for a biennium, or is that 1 year at a time?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Anderson, that is for a biennium. And I think I would just offer to address some of the stuff that came up in the House committee. One of the questions I think on that side was the why do we need a position? And the simple answer for that is we probably wouldn't had 2020 not hit us. When 2020 hit us and the budget cuts came through, this is a general funded section. We actually, with good cause, reappropriated 3 positions within our agency to better help those sections that were drowning from, unemployment insurance claims and stuff from the pandemic. So we made good use of those positions, but we moved them over there on a permanent basis because those are federal funds that pay for that rather than general funds.
Other questions, Senator Furphy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me ask about this employee. This employee is going to require some significant skills in managing employees, et cetera. Do we have enough money in there for that?
Mr.
Wolf,
Chairman,
can we get them trained up?
Senator Furphy, yeah, we actually, so our labor standards unit, we have a work share agreement with the Federal Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. And that's what gives us the authority basically to work, the claims that come through for, Title VII of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which, age, race, all of those discrimination claims are worked through us, through that work share agreement. We also are fortunate enough, I think, to have in that work share agreement, we do get a lot of discounted type training. So we, all of our folks go through, an initial type training with the EEOC representatives. They are trained to handle those claims. There is special training that will be required of this person to handle the federal side of things. One of the things that's a bit different on the federal side is the EEO counseling part. That is not something our folks are currently trained to do, but the training exists out there, and it's, and to be honest with you, not terribly expensive. So,
Thank you. Any other questions, committee, of anybody on the panel? Any final thoughts, Major Hinkle, on this? Are you done walking us through this bill?
Mr. Chairman, I believe so. And I don't have anything further to add.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Wolf, anything for the time being?
Mr. Chairman, no, I don't think
Okay.
so.
Once again, we appreciate all your efforts on the
Thank you.
bill, and we reserve the right to come back with questions for any of the three of you as we work along. I want to go to any other, I'm not seeing any other agencies here this evening on this bill. Public comment. Let's go to public comment. Do we have anybody online just for, okay. Let's go to public comment on House Bill 53. Please come forward. Good evening. State your name for us, if you would, just for the record, and welcome.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Marilyn Burton, and I am, this bill came out of comments that I made to the committee meeting on the 29th of November. So my intent and hope was to develop a process for members to use when the guard processes didn't work out for them. For example, in my own complaint process, I learned that all roads lead back to the governor and the adjutant general. So I filed in October of 18. At the time, the regulations gave me 12 months to file, and I met those, and I filed with the Secretary of the Air Force Inspector General's office. In December of 2018, the Air Force changed the regulations, and a member has 60 days to file. Well, by the time my complaint was returned to the state from Washington, D.C., the new regulations were in place, and then my complaint was readily dismissed based upon the new regulations, not based upon the regulations in place at the time that I had filed. So with this bill, my biggest concern is that I believe it only meets a portion of the intent that is needed. As you all know, I left the Wyoming Guard in June of 2018. And you're like, wow, that was 3.5 years ago, almost 4 years ago. Why are you even still here? And I can tell you, Cheyenne is a tiny little community, and I have had multiple troops who have reached out to me since I've left the Wyoming Guard. And when they had concerns, and I'd be like, oh, well, you need to use this process or this process or this process, and this is how it's supposed to go. Many of those members were retaliated against and pushed out and just made their life a living hell, to the point where they either dropped their complaint or transferred to another organization or left the military altogether. And so I was hoping for something that would go outside of. So, I mean, absolutely, use the processes that are in place. But when those processes fail and when leadership fails, where do they go? And that was the biggest concern that I had, because I was thinking this was including Inspector General complaints, congressional complaints, hostile work environment, a multitude of things. And the way this is written, it's very narrowly written to equal opportunity. And that's a very, very narrow lane, because if it doesn't fall under race, gender, religion, color, national origin, age, disability for civilians, they've probably added a few since then it doesn't apply here. It doesn't apply to fraud, waste, and abuse. It doesn't apply to abuse of power. It doesn't apply to hostile work environment. I'm just trying to get help for all of the people that end up coming to me. I don't like having horrible conversations with members of the Guard who have no idea who I am when I run into them in the Walmart.
Thank you for being here, Ms. Burton. I appreciate that. So the EEOC complaints, you say that narrows the focus. So some of those things you brought up, you do not feel like anybody can go forward with this and work with our workforce services people?
Well, that's the question that I have.
Okay, we'll sure ask that. Any further comments tonight?
For Mr. Wolf, the Equal Employment Opportunity
You can go through
Counselor-
just go through the
sorry,
chair and
Mr. Chairman.
we'll be glad to
The
forward.
Equal Employment Opportunity Counselor Training can be conducted through the Defense Equal Opportunity Management Institute out of Patrick Air Force Base, Florida. So that's one option for them. And when I worked for the State Equal Employment Manager back in 2009, we held a course here in Wyoming and the instructors flew in, because that was more cost effective than sending 26 people to Florida.
Appreciate that.
I was scribbling a whole bunch of notes. So they said this process would be a quicker process. What does the committee feel an adequate timeline on an EEO or EEO complaint would be? As you know, we have a case that's out there that literally the complainant filed in March of 2012. It has been going on for 10 years.
Ms. Burton, just on that front, I think we mentioned in November, regretfully, there's not a whole lot we can do on things that happened 10 years ago, 8 years ago, 5 years ago. We can, however, do everything we can to get started on some new chapters, and I think that's what this bill does.
Okay.
So, just a heartfelt sorry about some of the situations that you may have run into. Unfortunately, we can't retroactively go back and change things. But
Okay,
you
so-
already know that. So
Correct. Well, with this bill, can we add timelines that these processes will be completed within a certain amount of timelines? And are you willing to add deadlines to have them met in a more timely fashion so that we don't have more cases going as long as some have in the past?
we'll sure take that under consideration when the committee works the bill. But committee, any questions?
I have a
Ms.
question,
Burton?
Mr.
Senator
Chairman.
Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, did I hear you say that you now counsel people that are having this problem? Are you running a business? to
I am
do
not
that?
running a business. I
Oh.
have people just reach out to me all the time. I do
You're
not
just
have a
doing it
business.
as a favor.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions of Ms. Burton? Thank you for being here.
Thank you,
We-
Mr. Chairman.
As we work the bill, we will consider. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, sir.
Okay, any other public comment? Mr. Winnie, please come forward.
Mr. Chairman, Bill Winnie, Sublette County. Across my 30 years active duty in the Navy, much of it in the submarine world did not have women on board ships. I ended up as commanding a ship with a crew of about 1,300 to 1,400, about 350 were women, and the rest men. Interestingly, I found, and we were tradesmen doing all sorts of things, welders, electricians, electronics technicians. I found the women brought a different problem-solving technique that was of great value to that ship. But I wanted to go on and talk. Article 138, by the way, the formal name of it is Breaches of Good Order and Discipline, and that's a very broad title, and that's why you don't see it in the civilian world, but in the military it's useful. And what I would remark about the military side of things is it is absolutely incumbent on the profession of the military to root out things, I guess, like you just heard. I don't know any of the specifics, so I can't comment. I heard a number of cases of things like this while I was in command on the USS Holland. And my one comment that I would enjoin the committee to keep in mind is these things go both ways. It isn't just men toward women. You see it in the other direction. And so just tuck that one away. There's a presumption that it's going to be men, but anyway, you get the idea. My point about chain of command is it absolutely has to be pursued. And so tuck that one away too. I'm sure that the, the general is working on that. But anyway, the other comment I would make for you with regard to the DFS folks, my wife pursued a complaint against a school district that went through the DFS process. And so I think the training thing that I believe I heard talked about in here is very important. In my observation, the way my wife's case was handled was underwhelming. I didn't like it. It was a ponderous process, and you just heard about timelines and deadlines. I think you need to put deadlines in there because these things are allowed to spin out. People start forgetting things. People start saying, well, that's not so bad after all. So, subject to your questions, thank you very much. Wyoming kind of has a six-gun mentality sometimes. The guy that shoots first. Anyway, subject to questions, Mr. Chairman, thank you.
Mr. Winnie, thank you. Anything for Mr. Winnie? Thank you for being here. Okay, further public comment. Any further public comment on House Bill 53? Okay, public comment is closed. What's your pleasure on this bill, committee?
Move bill.
Moved by Senator Anderson, second by Senator Pappas. Discussion. Any discussion before we work the bill? Senator Pappas.
Perhaps we could ask the administrator to come back up and just discuss the timeline issue.
Administrator Wolf. Gosh,
Yes,
darn it,
thank
I
you,
messed
Mr.
that up
Chairman.
before. I'm sorry about that.
No problem.
Mr. Wolf, what are your thoughts in that regard?
So, Mr. Chairman, I think from a timelines perspective, it's a bit difficult. And the reason for that is, we try as an agency to have those conducted. In fact, our average that we looked at was about 168 days for us to complete an investigation from beginning to end. Frequently what will happen in these claims is there's attorneys involved that often ask for extensions. That can, be a 20, 30-day extension, whatever we feel is appropriate. Sometimes we'll deny those, but more often than not, we have to give people time to prepare their argument, and their case. So, I would just add that federally, the EEOC says that if our investigation is not complete within 180 days, 6 months, the complainant or the charging party has the right to then request from the EEOC what is called a right to sue letter. And that basically says that here, your investigation is not complete, but you have the right then to go to federal district court once you have that right to sue letter. So it basically says you've exhausted your administrative remedy. Here's your chance to sue the employer. So that.
So sorry to interrupt, but can you state 180 days? Is that what I heard you say?
Mr. Chairman, that's correct. Yep.
Okay.
So, and I think just from a perspective of where we stand, the other reason timelines are a bit difficult is because of some of those extensions that are often granted. Sometimes we don't have, the witnesses aren't readily available. We have to track those people down sometimes. There's a lot involved in holding to a timeline. I can tell you from just our claims that we currently have, we have some claims that are over a year old. And the reason for that is just because sometimes we have trouble tracking these people down. and we have to complete and do the thorough investigation, so.
So, Mr. Wolf, and sorry to jump in front of Senator Pappas here, good question to start this all off. So by rule, you're going to be adopting these rules, working with our military department. Those rules will contain 180 days and some of the things you just shared with us, will they not?
I would have to double check our rules, Mr. Chairman. I think that's a federal rule that we adhere by, but I couldn't today point that out to you. I'm fairly certain it's a federal, I know it's a federal rule. I just don't know where to direct you to see it, so.
Thank you. I saw some head shakes. Senator Pappas, and then we'll go to Senator Anderson.
Yeah, I just wanted to also ask you about what is in an EEOC complaint and what is not. You know, we just heard testimony that there are things that are not there. Can you shed some light?
Sure, Mr. Chairman.
It's all right. Tit for tat, you know what I mean? I messed yours up. Go ahead.
Senator Pappas, sure. Primarily what will be included is those items that are listed under Title VII of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, which are race, color, religion, gender, national origin, and I believe sexual orientation and gender identity are included in those.
Follow up? So, Mr. Wolf, hypothetically, and I didn't get them all written down by Ms. Burton, but she listed a couple of things, I think a congressional inquiry or any number of other things. IG complaint. What happens when a complaint like that would come forward? Are you prohibited from taking up something like that?
Mr. Chairman, yeah, under current statute that exists today, the Department of Workforce Services and the Labor Standards Division, we don't have any authority over those federal agencies.
So by necessity, that has to go a different route.
Mr. Chairman, correct. There is a process on, like the EEOC webpage that all federal agencies, have to have an EEO counselor or availability of an EEO counselor on site to do those types of things. And I assume they're routed from there to the appropriate people.
Okay. Senator Anderson.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Excuse me. Mr. Chairman, the 180 days limit, and then they can sue. Do they sue the state or their employer, or who do they sue?
Mr. Chairman, they would sue their employer in federal district court.
And they wouldn't sue the state at all, even though the state has been investigating it for 180 days?
Mr. Chairman, that's correct. No, the suit wouldn't be filed against us. It would be filed on their employer for their discrimination. Even though our investigation is not complete and it may still be ongoing, the law says that they have the right to start their case and sue their employer after that 180-day time frame has lapsed. That's, I guess, the amount of time they consider their administrative remedy to be fully taken place.
So, Mr. Wolf, in this case, it would be the military department of the state of Wyoming, right?
Mr. Chairman, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Mr. Wolf? Any questions, Senator Pappas, for the Adjutant General? Okay, all right. Thank you very much. Okay, let's take a look through the bill real quickly. I'm not going to go page by page, committee, but any amendments? Any thoughts for amendments? Bottom of page 5, this is a bill that will be re-referred to the Appropriations Committee, and sure hoping that Administrator Wolf can be around that day. That would be really helpful. Okay. All right.
Page 7, Mr. Chairman, page 7, there's an amendment to change line 15 to section 1 and 2 of this act, and just add "and 2."
Okay, and committee, that is what was in your packet. The proposed amendment, and Senator Anderson just moved that. Do I have a second? Second by Senator Pappas. Discussion. All in favor of the amendment, say aye. Aye. Any opposed, no? Okay, that amendment has passed. Anything else on this bill, committee? Okay, Kim, would you please call roll on House Bill 53?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Anderson?
Aye.
Senator Furphy?
Aye.
Senator McEwen?
Aye.
Senator Pappas?
Aye.
Chairman Landon?
Aye.
5 ayes do pass amended.
Senator Pappas, would you be willing to carry this one? Thank you. We'll be right behind you. This is an important bill, and we will get that referred in the morning to the second committee. So it will come back in a couple of days. So, okay, the next bill for our consideration is House Bill 82. And I see the sponsor of the bill has been here. Thank you for your patience, Representative Wilson. And thanks for coming.
Thank you, Mr.
Tell
Chairman.
us
Thanks for
about
having me.
military discharge and benefits.
So I did provide handouts. I'm not intending to read straight down them. That's always very painful. But I figured it would give you the information in a fairly concise form if you have occasion to talk to your colleagues on the floor. So, Mr. Chairman, I myself have not served in the military, but my husband is retired from the Coast Guard. Both his brothers retired from the Army. His father retired from the Air Force. My son-in-law just got out of the Marines. My father was in World War II, my grandfather in World War I, and relatives before that in the Civil War, the Revolutionary War, and the French and Indian War. So when things come up military-wise, I tend to perk up my ears. So I'm just going to start. My explanation on why I'm bringing this bill will actually take me longer than the bill itself, because the bill is actually a fairly small bill. But you will all remember that back in September, President Biden announced that he was going to require all the federal employees to have a COVID vaccine, which included the military. So as far as the military, now, I personally didn't think that was a good idea, but that's not what this bill is about. I fully agree that the commander-in-chief has the ability to order his troops to do something. However, as time went on after the beginning of September, we started to hear that maybe the military services were going to be kind of punitive about discharging people who didn't want to have a COVID vaccine. There was and you'll see some of the examples on this, but for example, there was a letter from the Chief of Naval Operations that talked about their ability to recoup bonuses and training pay, that people would probably get a general discharge rather than an honorable discharge. There was an article in the Army Times where an Army spokesman suggested that they were considering court-martial. And then around Thanksgiving time, I actually received 2 calls from members of the Guard who were supposed to report for a weekend drill and had been told that they might face jail time if they didn't get the COVID vaccine. So I started working on a bill, and I do want to say that this was my idea. It wasn't anything that the general came to me with or anything like that, although they're quite supportive. But so I started to have a bill drafted. In the Wyoming legislature over the years, we have been very appreciative of our military folks in Wyoming, and there's quite a lot of exemptions and benefits in Wyoming for veterans. Whether it's property taxes or a special license plate or tuition, some occupational licensure components, whatever. But nearly all of them say in the statute that the person has to be honorably discharged. And with the possibility that some of these folks might get a less than honorable discharge, that's what led me to this bill. And I'll look at the wording specifically. But so what the bill does is says that we can't decide what the federal government says, what the general, up at we're not in charge of that, but we can have something to do with our Wyoming statutes. So what the bill says is that for purposes of Wyoming exemptions and benefits, if a person can show that they were discharged solely for refusal to get the COVID vaccine, that shall be considered an honorable discharge for the purpose of getting the exemption and the benefit. So it doesn't change any of the requirements for the exemption and benefits. They're not all the same. Some have residency requirements. Some say, well, you had to be in combat. There's variety, and I don't touch any of that. All I say is that if they were discharged solely for refusing to get a COVID vaccine, then it will be considered honorable. Since I started on the drafting, there was an amendment made to the National Defense Authorization Act that stated that members of the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and Space Corps could not receive anything other than an honorable discharge. However, that leaves out the Coast Guard because they don't fall under the NDAA. And to be honest, it's not clear to me whether that covers the guards. And as we all know from our own experience, a budget footnote lasts just as long as the budget, right? Which is, in this case, a year. So I proceeded with the bill. And I certainly have more information that I can give you on that. But just looking at the bill briefly, on page 1, you'll see that the language is put into Title 8, and that is the general definitions for Wyoming statute. And the reason it's there is because our military benefits are scattered all throughout the green books. Some are in the property tax titles, some are in the occupational licensing titles. They're all over the place. So this way, it just goes in at the beginning. And then you see the language in the paragraph on page 2 between lines 5 and 11. I worked with the military department to make sure the language was correct. We had to go back and forth a little bit just to make sure the language tightened up. And so I believe that is correct. The line 11 where it has COVID-19 as defined in 11141, that was just what we put in there back in 2020, the definition of what is COVID. That's what that is. So, Mr. Chairman, I'd be glad to answer any other questions as they come up to you, but that's the bill in a nutshell. And I just feel that, as I say, I'm not in charge of what the federal government does, but I do think that through history, we in the Wyoming legislature have shown that we honor and respect and value the service of our veterans. And I think that this bill just reflects that.
We certainly do that. Madam Chairman, thanks for all your work on this and great presentation. Questions, committee? Any questions for the representative?
Mr. Chairman, I have a question. This doesn't do anything for the Coast Guard.
Mr. Chairman, it would
Does it?
because in the paragraph on page 2, it says on line 8, line 7 and 8, any veteran of the United States Armed Forces or National Guard, and by definition, Armed Forces does include the Coast Guard.
Oh, okay. Mr. Chairman, follow up. That definition for COVID-19, does that include COVID variants?
That's a good question.
Mr. Chairman,
Madam
thank you.
Chairman?
There was some wording about, let's see, it says the definition of COVID is SARS-CoV-2. I'm sorry, Senator Anderson, I don't really know if that includes variants or not, but that's the definition that we have in Wyoming statute.
Oh, my God.
So that's a good question, Senator Anderson, and we'll put an ear to the ground. Senator Pappas.
I think that's beyond our scope of the bill right now. If we want to later on change the definition back there, we could do that. But who knows? There'll be tons of variants probably over the next century. I mean, because it's not going to go away.
And Mr. Chairman, if I might, I suspect that whatever code is put on the service members DD 214 will probably not be that specific. I'm just hypothesizing.
I doubt, Representative, that somebody's going to drill down that deeply and misconstrue the intent of the bill. So, Representative, thank you. If you could hang on, and we reserve the right to ask you a question later, but I would like to go to the military department on this one and hear any comments, General, that you might have. Major, welcome back. Thanks for being here again. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks, Mr. Chairman. I would say that the military department's in support of this bill. While I don't know that it would have much impact on the Wyoming Guard, the intent right now being to discharge those folks honorably, there is some elegance in, particularly for our active component folks that are Wyoming residents and come back to this, to be able to ensure that they get their benefits. So really, that's probably the bottom line for it. So it's good on our side, sir.
Okay, questions for the general? Senator Furphy, go ahead.
Just curious, is there any difference in definition of honorable and honorably in terms of the military?
General, are we okay with those words in there?
You want to talk? Yeah.
Mr. Chairman and Senator Furphy, I don't think there is any practical distinction between honorable and honorably. So typically we will have 3 characterizations of administrative separations. That would be honorable, under honorable conditions, which we sometimes refer to as a general, or under other than honorable conditions, or if you're on the Army side, other than honorable, so OTH or UOTHC. Anytime you see the word honorable or honorably, it should be referring to the same thing.
Okay, thank you for that. Any follow-up? Committee? Anything else? Senator McEwen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So does that mean the BCD's gone?
So
Thank you,
Major,
Mr.
what's
Chairman.
the VCD?
Mr. Chairman, Senator McEwen, I suspected I might get asked that. So no, those characterizations still exist, and those are your court-martial punishments. Your BCD is a bad conduct discharge, and your DD is a dishonorable discharge. Those can only be adjudicated by a military court.
Thank you, Senator. Okay. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Let's go to public comment, and I'm just looking. Nobody else has joined us long distance. Come on up, Mr. Winnie.
Mr. Chairman, Bill Winnie, Sublette County, 30 years active duty in the Navy. I would remark on the honorable conditions thing, you have honorable discharge, general discharge. There's a slight difference in benefits between honorable and general, but for all, and it's considered under honorable conditions. With regard to vaccinations, I would remark that you don't understand military vaccinations until you're going down a line with hospital corpsmen on each side of you using an air gun that injects you with 2 or 3 vaccinations in one shot. I did that in the summer 1968. I still got a hole in this arm when one of their guns was set too high. But all of those vaccinations were released for general usage. One of the distinctions that's going on right now that's causing some of the military people to not want to take the vaccine is these vaccines are still under emergency use authorizations, to my knowledge. And that gives you pause. My physician out in the St. John's Hospital in Jackson didn't like what he saw. And he basically advised me not to get vaccinated until this summer. And I got vaccinated. But his rationale was he didn't like the statistics. He didn't like the numbers. He didn't like what he was seeing. And of course, in the military, you're talking 18 to 25-year-olds, something like that for the bulk. I was really an old guy when I retired at the age of 52. You know, his rationale was very simple. You're now over 70. If you look at the numbers of people at risk at 70 years old, the risks go up. So he advised that I get a shot and get vaccinated. But I think that illustrates an issue about the quandary that some of these young kids, 18, 20, 25 years old, face when they do it, when they get into. So I support the bill. I believe that Representative Wilson's rationale, or however you would put it, is right on the mark. And subject to your questions, thank you very much.
Thanks, Mr. Winnie. Questions? Okay, thank you for being here. Further Public comment. Any further public comment on 82? Okay, I'm going to close public comment. Committee, what's your pleasure on this one?
Move the bill. Second.
Moved by Senator Pappas, second by Senator McEwen. Did I get that backwards?
Yeah.
Okay, Senator McEwen moved that. Gosh
Oh,
darn it.
extra.
Yeah, there you go. And he moved it honorably, I'll tell you that.
No BCD.
Yeah, there you go. No DD either.
No DD.
So, committee, any comments on the bill or any proposed amendments on the bill?
Good to go.
Okay.
Call for the question.
Kim, would you call roll on House Bill 82, please?
Senator Anderson,
Aye.
Senator Furphy,
Aye.
Senator McEwen,
Aye.
Senator Pappas,
Aye.
Chairman Landon.
Aye. Nice work, Representative. Thank you for being here and bringing this bill to us. Are you good to go up on the floor of the Senate, or would you like somebody from?
Mr. Chairman,
Oh,
I
I'm on
believe
the
Senator
bill.
Pappas is willing to carry it, but
I'm on the bill.
any of the other senators on the sponsorship seemed very enthusiastic, so they'll probably be arm wrestling each other for the privilege.
Well-
Owner may want to do it.
Well, he's a strong horse, but I gave him that other one and I was trying to be, a little bit careful not to
I know
overload him.
Senator Salazar, Senator Boner, any of them will.
But if anybody can handle it, Senator Pappas
And
can.
you
I'll
can
tell you
share
that.
those little papers with them.
Let's
if
leave
you
it up
want
to
more.
Senator Pappas to work with his colleagues up there and we'll back him up. Okay, Representative?
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank
he
you.
got
Thank you
another.
thank you very much.
Who got the other one too, didn't he?
Yeah, but I'm on this bill.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he signed on to this one. Yeah. Yeah. He's a co-sponsor.
So is Boner though.
Yeah.
He'd like to do it too.
Yeah, there you
I'll
go.
talk to him.
Committee, let's go to House Bill 18. Want to thank members of our agencies for sticking around tonight to be with us. Thank you, gentlemen. Please come forward. Both of you can probably come up and have a seat. We're among friends here. House Bill 18, Off-Road Recreational Vehicle Registration Amendments. It's easy for you to say. Good evening, gentlemen. Mr.
evening,
Rossetti,
Mr.
you want to lead
Chairman.
us off tonight? and
You bet,
Tell us
sir.
about this bill?
Sure. So Taylor Rossetti, Support Services for YDOT. In front of the committee tonight is House Bill 18. If you recall, during the interim, we noticed an issue with House Bill 86 from the 2021 general session. And that bill created 31-232, which allowed for the registration of dirt bikes to be ridden on roads. The issue that we noticed, and we did not have any record of this being talked about as the bill was working through the session last year, is the language that you can find there on page 2. So the current language in the law read that the registration expires upon transfer of ownership of the vehicle. That effectively makes that license plate permanent. Until somebody actually transfers a vehicle. That certainly is a policy decision, but it would be out of alignment with every other registration we have, with the exception of basically the Pioneer license plates. So our ask and what we worked through the interim committee was to add the language there on lines 3 and 4, and that now it would simply read that the registration expires annually in accordance with Wyoming Statute 31-206A, and upon transfer of ownership of the vehicle. So it would be more in line with what you see with other registrations. One of the other things then that has come up and has been asked is about how many of these vehicles have been registered since July. It is a little bit complicated, but it's not a high number of vehicles. There's about 66 of them that we can track down.
56?
66. Yep, sorry, Chairman. That question was asked on the other side, so that might be something that comes up in discussion here. The other thing that we did talk about is there in section 2, which is really kind of the enactment, and the way that this reads now is it does allow a grandfather for those vehicles that were registered after July 1 of 2021 through the effective date of this bill. So there is that grandfather provision. I do think that potentially creates some issues, but I think as the discussion went on the other side of the house, it was really a whoops, and to go back and go after those individuals didn't seem to be the direction that the other body wanted to do. I certainly would not advise on that. I just want to point out that's how that enactment reads. And with that, I'd certainly stand for any questions you may have, sir.
Questions for Mr. Rossetti? Any questions? Thank you very much. Let's move on to the Department of State Parks and Cultural Resources and various sundry other things.
Good afternoon. Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Dave Glenn, Deputy Director of Wyoming State Parks. I'm just standing side by side with Whiteout here and very supportive of them catching this piece. And while we oversee the motorized trails program, we're perfectly aligned with Whiteout on this as well.
Questions for State Parks? Perfect.
Mr. Chairman, they don't need this license plate on the trails, do they? Just if they're going to operate on state highways?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Anderson, yes, they do not.
I think where that came up, David, it was somebody getting from one place to another, from one of our trails to another trail, and they had to go on a county road or something. Wasn't that part of the genesis of this thing? I don't know.
Chairman Landon, we are looking both in talking with Whiteout at coming forward to you and TRW potentially to look at changing that piece to require insurance and equipment. That's when they have the registration sticker for enrolled routes that are those city streets and potentially county roads as well.
So, that's a good point. And Mr. Rossetti, I'm looking at you on this too. It feels like we could revisit what you just mentioned and maybe a couple of other areas if we're gonna consider that topic, which I think is very appropriate. Do you agree with that?
Mr. Chairman, thanks for the question. Yes, I would agree with that. And I do believe, as Mr. Glenn mentioned, there was really kind of a gap there in these off-road vehicles where the dirt bikes were not allowed to be registered. And it did pose some problems for some individuals trying to get them to some of the trails. So this does provide that avenue for them now.
Okay. So you think we can, if we work that a little bit during the interim, we can get it fixed?
Mr. Chairman, if that would be the pleasure of this, we would be amenable to going down that road.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? Senator Furphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, this may be a crazy question, but for Mr. Rossetti, if we license a lot of these off-road vehicles, are we increasing any risk to normal traffic on the roadways that you're aware of? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Rossetti?
Mr. Chairman and Senator Furphy, this particular bill and the bill that was passed last year that we're correcting here is really for a very specific niche market, and it's really dirt bikes. The addition of the availability to do off-road recreational vehicles, so like four-wheelers and side-by-sides, has existed for quite some time. I don't have any data that would support that it is any more risky than it was in the past. I would say that they do not necessarily contain the normal safety equipment, airbags and such that a vehicle would pose. But the law is pretty prescriptive that if you can't keep up with speed, you're supposed to drive to the far right. If you can't keep up, you're supposed to be placarded like a slow-moving vehicle. So it's very similar to how you allow agricultural implements to be moved on roadways. So I think in that respect, it seems to work right now. And again, this is just a very, very small portion of what was already allowed out there.
Follow-up? Just as an aside, it's kind of interesting. We've had quite a proliferation over the last 10 or 20 years of these four-wheelers and off-road vehicles and razors and all kinds of things. It has been interesting to watch. We've got a little place out at one of the lakes up there in Natrona County, and it's been interesting to watch that. Honestly, the sheriff's department struggles to get arms around some of it. You've got everything from golf carts to razors that go 75 miles an hour, and yeah. So I would certainly vote for anything we can do on this front to take another look or as deep as you guys want to go, we would certainly, next Thursday, I think, consider that for sure. So appreciate you guys on this one. Anything else? Okay, let's go to public comment on this bill. Director, you've just been sitting quietly all night. Are you good to go? You want to come up and say anything about? I see that. I was thinking the same thing. Thank you, Director. Please come forward. Yeah. Mr. Hornock, good to see you again. Thanks for sticking around for this one.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ben Hornock, I'm a precinct committee man here in Laramie County. I represent a portion of the rural west of Laramie County. And I just want to kind of talk through this bill just a little bit and say that I disagree with what is happening with this bill. So you hear testimony that it will fix a problem, and you also hear that it's a minimal amount of people that this will affect. But I want to just be clear, and it has been made clear what this is about and who it affects. So this is specific to dirt bikes. In the bill, the definition of a dirt bike under 31-101-1-101A, Roman numeral 15K2, that is specifically a dirt bike. It's less than 600 pounds. It has two wheels. You straddle it to ride it, and it's in that definition. It says that it does not require a license. So we're dealing with dirt bikes, and who rides dirt bikes? Well, first of all, what this bill does is it requires a yearly registration on dirt bikes, at the same level as motorcycles. So I understand that a motorcycle having two wheels, engine in the middle, handlebars, it's very similar to a dirt bike. It looks the same, but the uses of those two vehicles are completely different. Most of the time, the nearest dirt bikes get to a roadway is the end of the driveway before they get on the trailer, because they're put on the trailer, they're trailered, or they're put in the back of a pickup truck, they're taken to the track, they're taken to public land, they're taken to the sand dunes. Or another example is a lot of the agricultural community. They come in really handy when you're out there dodging sagebrush, or you want to jump on something and go check your mail. You want to go open a irrigation weir. You want to go do something like that. You jump on this thing, you go down the road, you come right back. You go through your field, whatever it is. So these vehicles are very handy to the ag community as well. So I know 12-year-olds who get a little 125cc motorcycle for their birthday. I know college kids who have a dirt bike in the back of their pickup truck because after class they do everything they can to get to the track, and their grades show it. I know ranchers, like I said, who have these dirt bikes and use them when they can, when the weather permits, all summer long. So you're putting essentially a tax, a fee on those people that don't use a dirt bike in the same way that a motorcycle is used. One of the beautiful things about dirt bikes is the freedom, but I just want to caution this body to, just because there was, it's a beautiful thing in Wyoming right now. If somebody buys a dirt bike, to register it once and not have to worry about it again. I know people who also, your registration fee might be more than the gas you use to put in this motorcycle for, you know, the limited uses that you actually give it. So this creates a little bit more stress on the citizens of Wyoming on certain pleasures that we have as citizens, then I think it's really worth doing. So I would ask you not to, I would ask you to pull the plug on this one and let it die a natural death.
Mr. Hornock, thank you. I appreciate your testimony. And committee, any questions from any of you first? I have one. Go ahead, Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, I'm a little confused because I think all we said here was that it expires annually in accordance with, so you're saying they should be able to buy a permit or whatever it is and have it forever, I guess, what you're saying, huh?
Mr. Hornock?
Mr. Chairman, I think so. I think that, you know, dirt bikes, because of the way that we use dirt bikes, it's a very different use than, say, a motorcycle, say, you know, and this doesn't deal with four-wheelers, this doesn't deal with side-by-sides, this doesn't deal with those, the razors, anything like that. This specific bill deals with motorcycles, and the use of a motorcycle, or I'm sorry, the use of a dirt bike, there's no comparison with a regular motorcycle, in my opinion. I mean, I might, the two wheels of my motorcycle have probably never been off the ground except when it's been on a lift. And, you know, a dirt bike is much different. You're trying to get the two wheels off the ground.
Go ahead, Senator Pappas.
So Ben, what do we do? I mean, what about four-wheeled vehicles? I mean, we put plates on those things and they're off-road a lot of the time. Sometimes they're never on a road either. So,
Mr. Thornton, what do you think of that?
Mr. Chairman, I don't know the specific regulations. I imagine you guys might know the requirements, or there's people in the room that know the requirements as far as four-wheelers. But again, I would, these type of vehicles are not purchased so that I can get to work. These type of vehicles are not purchased so that you can get groceries, or so they have it's called a toy for a reason. And I really don't believe that the state should look at an avenue that you can gain revenue from and seek to gain revenue from it. Just because there is an explosion in the dirt bikes, the racers, all that stuff, that could be just because there's a lot of freedom when it comes to that. And so, you know, I really wish that, I mean, just look on Craigslist. These things are sold and traded all the time. And you know, it doesn't, the use is completely different for these things than a vehicle that can be used for transportation. The places you use these are completely different than those type of vehicles. And I really think that, you know, I don't mind registering something when I buy it, but a yearly registration on these things, what's probably going to happen is those registrations are going to get thrown in the trash. I know of ranchers that probably will really have heartburn having to register their dirt bike every year, and you know, for the limited uses that they give it or something like that. I mean, you're potentially turning people into criminals a little bit, you know, but again, this is my opinion, and I know that you guys have probably worked this bill, and it came out of the interim. And I understand there's purpose behind it, but I do think that you're taking something in the population that is used for pleasure, and you're finding a way to gain revenue from it. And I think there's better ways to do it. The Transportation Department, in this legislative session, we're giving them millions and millions and millions of dollars. And I don't think this is one of the little revenue generation items that really should be considered.
Follow up, Senator Pappas, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I don't know that we're really looking to gain revenue out of something like this, but I had two questions. One is, what happens, I might buy the argument if we would never see one on the road, but what if we find them on the road? I mean, what's to assure us there's always going to be a dirt bike in the dirt somewhere off of a public right of way? I don't think we have assurance that somebody's not going to drive it down the street. Second of all, and I'm not sure I agree with the use, because certainly we license or register lots of recreational vehicles. Look at boats. They're never on a public right of way, but they go through that process. I'm not. I don't know.
So
I'd like to hear the comments of the department and parks regarding the.
yeah, I think we'll bring the gentleman up here in a minute. But Mr. Thornick, I do want to say that actually revenue never came up in this last interim. I mean, it's negligible. You're right. It's not really even worth. Yeah, it's probably going to cost more just to whatever. But I think it was more about the consistency and the concerns that were raised by Senator Pappas. We do have more and more vehicles using more and more of our road right-of-ways, even if it's to transition to the next trail or to the next sand dune or whatever. So that's kind of what drove that, was just to get some consistency out across the. We sure appreciate your thoughts, Zoe. And my question tonight was, did you bring this up to the House? I mean, when it was worked over there, did you have an opportunity to share your concerns, or?
Mr. Chairman, I'm a little bit embarrassed to say that I was late for that meeting. So it was worked in the first 3 minutes of a meeting, and I missed that portion.
Okay. Well, we do appreciate you being here. Thanks for your expertise and your thoughts, and it's been valuable. Thank you. Appreciate it. I'm going to ask the department to come back up.
Mr. Chairman.
Senator Anderson.
Mr. Chairman, we were talking about the four-wheelers and that kind of stuff. If I have a four-wheeler that I don't take on public roads, I don't have to license it. I get the stickers every year, but I don't have to have the license plate. And what we're doing here is changing this from a forever registration to an annual registration for sure. I'm thinking that maybe we ought to be a little more along the lines of the four-wheelers, that if you're going to take it on a public road, you got to have license plates on it. And if you're just going to stay on the farm, like you say, you don't have to have license plates. And all my farm ranch friends don't license anything, but they're very careful not to ever be on a county road or a state highway. So maybe we're moving it to annual registration, and we should be moving it with only if they need it.
Might have to scrap the whole thing, it sounds like. We're going to get the department up here and clarify. Mr. Thornton, go ahead, and then we're going to get those gentlemen up to clarify some stuff. So.
Mr. Chairman, just briefly, in this type of vehicle, in order to drive on a roadway, there is requirements for a mirror, turn signals, brakes, headlight, that kind of thing. So technically, yes, somebody might drive it on a roadway, but it's not legal to do. And then there are situations as well, such as my father-in-law. He owns land that is not contiguous. And so he has to be on the roadway to get to transport a shovel to go open a gate, so.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you, Mr. Stone. I really appreciate it. Gentlemen, now, please come forward. Little clarification for the committee would be helpful, I think. Just a reiteration of exactly what the bill does and does not do. Mr. Rossetti.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess a couple of thoughts. So the bill that was brought before us last year that we're trying to simply correct does describe the situation similar to what Senator Anderson was mentioning, that this registering those vehicles allows them to be operated on highways. With that, in order to be operated on highways, there's also provisions that the operator has to be licensed to operate that type of vehicle. So that is standard across the board. As Senator Anderson mentioned, if you're not trying to operate these on highways, there's no reason to register them. You don't even have to put a sticker on them unless you want to operate them on the trail system. So if they're just simply sitting on your property, there's nothing you've got to do with them. The change here, again, I think gets down to aligning these types of vehicles with other motor vehicles, so that if folks want to operate those on highways, they are just registered on an annual basis like all other vehicles. And that's really why we are here is that last year there were people that wanted to operate these on the highway systems, which this was the mechanism to allow that to occur.
Well, Mr. Rossetti, I think, especially given all of the efforts in the southwest part of the state with this trail system and several of the communities going to trail status, and I'm looking at Dave because you know all about that. There's more and more people wanting to use more and more different kinds of vehicles on streets, roads. Anyway, Senator Pappas.
Okay, so just to be clear, so then the situation that Mr. Hornock described, if I'm just going to have a bike, it's going to reside in my garage, and I'm going to put it on the back of my pickup and take it to the mountains on dirt roads, I don't have to license it or register it at all, if it's not going to ever be on the public right of way.
Mr. Rossetti.
However, if I do want to put it on the public right of way and pursue the registration and licensure according to the bill, then I would have to outfit that with all the legal mirrors and all that stuff too, right?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Pappas, that is a good recap of the bill.
Okay. So then, Mr. Chairman, I think actually the bill does what we want it to do, and I don't think it precludes folks like Ben over there and his dad from using it on their property and not licensing it. I don't really see a problem.
Dave, I want to go to you real quick. Any thoughts from the trails folks?
Chairman Landon, Mr. Rossetti just hammered it down. It's perfect. The reason this bill came forward last year was when a vehicle was titled dirt, county clerks were not legally allowed to give them a license plate. And so they came forth and said, if we put all these horns on, blinkers, and other things, we should be able to drive them on the road and get a license plate. That's what that bill did last year. What we didn't do and didn't catch until the Great Whiteout team did catch was the piece that it needs to be registered just like any other auto vehicle every year.
Thank you for that. That helps. Director, any thoughts on this bill?
Mr. Chairman, I did want to just come forward and for the record, Luke Reiner, Director of Whiteout, and say, from my perspective as the director, this is an important bill to create consistency across all of our vehicle registrations. And what has been said by this team, and really prior testimony is correct, right? If you need to be on the road, if you want to be on the road, you're welcome to be on the road, but you got to be registered, because we need to know you're there, and we need to know you're safe. We need to know you're trained. We need to know to meet the requirements to be on the road. And if you aren't on the road, man, there's no requirement to register. But I do think from my vantage points, it's important to treat everybody who's on the road the same and not to have a specific carve out or niche.
Thank you for that. Committee, anything else for the panel? Okay, appreciate you guys. Thank you. And I do appreciate the discussion.
You got into the dirt on this one.
Yeah, we did. We did get off on the dirt a little bit, but that's okay. We learned a lot. So I'm going to close public testimony. And what's your pleasure on this
Move the
bill?
bill.
Move the bill by Senator Pappas and a second by Senator Furphy. Any amendments to the bill?
I need to work at it.
Anything else on the bill? Okay, let's call the roll on House Bill 18. Kim, thank you.
Senator Anderson,
Aye.
Senator Furphy,
Aye.
Senator McEwen,
Aye.
Senator Pappas,
Aye.
Chairman Landon.
Aye. Senator
ayes
Furphy,
do
you take
pass.
this for us, wouldn't you?
I'll do that.
We'll be right behind you. Yes, that'll be good. So committee, that completes our business for this evening. We have a couple of bills left in the hopper. Kim has kept track of those really well for us, and we will post those tomorrow, and I'll announce them. We will take up those two bills on Friday at noon, okay? That will probably, I think, clear up Monday night, where we won't have any other bills in the hopper, so just a heads up on that. Kim,
Mr. Chairman, I won't be there. 'Cause
Senator
I have
Anderson.
another meeting.
Yep, Senator Anderson has been briefed on that, and he's okay with us proceeding without him. Senator McEwen.
Wyoming Health is doing confirmations.
Okay, that came in after we did this, so if you,
It came in to me today.
right, so no problem. If you've got a conflict, we'll carry on
I
without you.
don't know which is more important.
We can
I guess
visit,
is
we'll
what I'm
visit up on the
asking.
floor.
How many
Yeah.
conflicts?